It was a cold, misty morning in the rugged mountains of northwestern Iran. The air was still, heavy with fog and the faint smell of rain. The valleys below were swallowed in white clouds that rolled slowly across the peaks. As if the mountains themselves were holding their breath, President Ebrahim Raisi, dressed in his traditional black robe and turban, stepped out from a line of black SUVs parked near a remote helipad. He had just concluded the inauguration ceremony of a newly completed dam near the Azerbaijan border, a symbol of progress, unity, and power. Cameras had flashed, speeches had echoed, and applause had filled the valley just hours earlier. But now the cheers were gone, replaced by the whisper of wind cutting through the mountains. Around him, security personnel and ministers moved briskly, their boots crunching against the gravel. The presidential helicopter, a Bell 212 painted in Iran's official colors, waited with its engines warming up, blades slicing slowly through the thickening fog. The airbase commander saluted sharply as the president approached. Raisi nodded respectfully, his expression calm, unreadable. He was known for his quiet authority, a man who rarely raised his voice but always commanded attention. His top aide leaned closer and murmured, "Sir, the weather is deteriorating fast. The control tower recommends delaying departure until visibility improves." Raisi paused for a moment, glancing at the clouds that were now hugging the peaks. He turned to his pilot, a veteran airman who had flown him many times before. "What do you think?" the president asked. The pilot, adjusting his headset, gave a small, confident smile. "Mr. President, I've flown through worse. The route is familiar. We'll be home before the storm hits." Raisi hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Let's go." As the group boarded, the mist swirled around them like smoke. One by one, the aides, the foreign minister, and the security officers climbed aboard. The sound of the rotor blades grew louder, shaking the ground beneath them. A gust of wind lifted the president's robe slightly as he stepped inside the helicopter and took his seat near the window. Inside, the cabin was narrow but orderly. Radios crackled softly. The pilot made final checks, altitude, fuel, route, and confirmed communication with the control tower. "Raisi 1, cleared for departure," came the voice over the radio. The co-pilot responded, "Copy that." Lifting off. The helicopter's skids rose from the ground, and within moments, they were airborne, climbing slowly into the white wall of fog. The base below disappeared, as if swallowed by the clouds. From the air, everything was a blur of gray and white. The peaks pierced through the mist like jagged teeth, and the valley below was hidden completely. The weather reports had warned of low visibility, but no one expected it to worsen this quickly. The pilot leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "We're entering dense fog," he said into his mic. "Maintain altitude at 8,000 feet. Stay on heading 240. The co-pilot adjusted the instruments. "Visibility less than 1 kilometer, sir." President Raisi glanced out of the small window beside him. He could see nothing, only a gray ocean of clouds. His reflection looked ghostly in the glass, the rhythmic vibration of the rotor echoing through the cabin. For a brief moment, his gaze softened. He thought of his family in Tehran, of the speeches still left to give, of the nation that seemed always on edge between hope and tension. Behind him, his foreign minister was reading a document, and two aides whispered over a folder marked "Confidential." The bodyguard sat rigid, eyes scanning the interior, though there was nothing to see. Every minute of the president's life was choreographed, but fate that morning had its own plan. Down below, on the ground, the control tower was beginning to lose radar clarity. The weather map showed thick clouds moving faster than predicted. The airbase controller radioed, "Raisi 1, be advised, storm cells forming west of your position. Recommend immediate altitude change or course correction." No response. "Just static." The pilot adjusted the frequency. "This is Raisi 1, copy." Proceeding as planned. "We'll update at next checkpoint." He turned briefly toward the co-pilot. "It's fine. Once we cross the ridge, it'll clear up." But outside, the world had turned to chaos. Wind began to lash against the helicopter's sides. The rain came suddenly, hard, relentless, hammering against the windows. Lightning flickered far off, illuminating the outline of mountains lurking below the fog. Inside the cockpit, alarms flickered briefly, turbulence warning. The pilot tightened his grip on the controls. The helicopter swayed violently for a second before stabilizing. "Hold on," he muttered. In the back, one aide looked nervous. "Sir, maybe we should turn around." Raisi didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the window, his expression calm, almost serene. "We've come this far," he said softly. "We'll be fine." The helicopter pressed forward into the heart of the storm. On the ground, minutes later, the radar signal flickered, then vanished. The control tower called repeatedly. No reply. The operator tried again and again, switching frequencies. Still nothing but silence. Above the mountains, lightning struck again, and for a brief instant, the fog glowed white. Somewhere within that light, the silhouette of the helicopter could be seen, small, fragile, and alone, vanishing deeper into the storm. No one knew then that this would be the last time anyone would see Raisi 1 alive. And as the sky closed behind it, the mountains went silent once more, keeping their secret hidden beneath the clouds. Minutes turned into hours. The airspace over northwestern Iran had grown eerily quiet. What had begun as a routine flight, the president's short return journey to Tabriz, had turned into a mystery of silence. In the Tehran Air Control Center, officers huddled around the glowing radar screens. The green blip that represented Raisi 1 had disappeared. Technicians checked the systems twice, then a third time. Nothing. Only static filled the communication lines. "Try frequency 285 again," one supervisor ordered. The operator adjusted his headset. "Raisi 1, this is Tehran Control. Do you copy?" Over. Silence. He tried again. Still nothing. The storm that had swept through the mountains was now a roaring wall of thunder, blocking both visibility and radio signals. Across the region, other aircraft began reporting trouble. A commercial flight to Tabriz radioed in. "Severe turbulence at 10,000 feet. Visibility 0. Heavy rain. Suggest rerouting." Tehran Control's chief officer leaned over the table. "Get in touch with the military base at Yolfa," he commanded. "Tell them to activate emergency tracking. The president's helicopter may be in distress." Inside the helicopter, chaos was unfolding. The wind screamed against the fuselage, shaking it like a leaf. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating faces pale with fear. The pilot struggled with the controls, muscles tense, trying to keep the aircraft level. The artificial horizon indicator flickered wildly, altitude dropping, 8,000 to 6,000 feet. The co-pilot shouted, his voice nearly drowned by the storm. The pilot gritted his teeth. "Power up! Climb! Climb!" But the engines howled without response, the rotors slicing through air so thin and wet that lift was faltering. President Ebrahim Raisi sat gripping the armrest beside the window. His usually calm expression had hardened into silent focus. He turned toward his foreign minister, seated across from him, who whispered a trembling prayer under his breath. The helicopter lurched violently, throwing one aide against the wall. A clipboard flew across the cabin, papers scattering like white birds. The interior lights flickered. "Stabilizer malfunction," the co-pilot yelled. "Switch to manual override," the pilot barked, his gloved hands dancing over the controls. Alarms blared in sharp, rhythmic beeps, one after another, overlapping, relentless. Outside, the fog had thickened into a living thing. The mountain peaks appeared and vanished like ghosts. Every flash of lightning revealed jagged rock faces terrifyingly close, too close. Terrain alert. "Pull up! Pull up!" The helicopter climbed sharply, engines straining, but the storm was stronger. Sheets of rain slapped the windshield, blurring everything into a smear of gray. The pilot could barely see the instruments. "Mayday! Mayday!" the co-pilot cried into the radio. "This is Raisi 1, experiencing severe..." The transmission cut mid-sentence. The signal dissolved into static. Back in Tehran, the communications team caught only fragments. "Mayday. Raisi 1. Altitude." Then silence. The chief officer froze. "Did we lose them?" someone whispered. He exhaled slowly, staring at the dead frequency. "Get the rescue teams ready," he said. "Now." In the mountains, the battle between machine and nature raged on. Inside the cockpit, the temperature had dropped. The pilot's breath fogged his visor. He shouted over the wind, "We've lost navigation." "Gyro's gone!" The co-pilot's eyes darted over the instrument panel. "Compass unreliable. I think we're veering east."
Keep heading 240,
the pilot ordered, forcing the control stick forward. We clear this ridge, we're safe, but the ridge loomed larger with every passing second. In the flashing light of the storm, the rocks looked like black blades cutting through the clouds. Altitude 4,000.
Pull up!
Raisi's aide gripped the seat beside him, knuckles white.
Sir, brace yourself!
The helicopter tilted dangerously, rotors groaning, fighting to stay airborne. The noise was deafening, metal straining, wind howling, alarms wailing. For a moment, it seemed the pilot might regain control. The aircraft leveled briefly. Relief flickered across his face. Then came a blinding white flash. A thunderclap exploded almost simultaneously, shaking the entire cabin. The helicopter jolted violently. One rotor blade clipped something unseen in the fog. The machine spun, the world turning upside down in a blur of chaos. The pilot screamed, "We've hit!" Impact. A deafening crash tore through the valley, metal twisting, fuel igniting, mountains trembling. The sound rolled for miles, swallowed gradually by the storm. Inside, time froze. The world was reduced to flame, smoke, and silence. Hours later, far away in Tehran, the crisis room was filled with tension. Reports poured in from radar stations, border patrols, and local villagers. One shepherd from a remote mountain village had called on his radio. Something exploded in the sky. Near the ridge, officials exchanged uneasy looks. Helicopters were scrambled for search and rescue. News networks began to whisper. The president's aircraft was missing. But even as the first rescue choppers lifted off, the storm still raged across the mountains, blocking all attempts to reach the suspected crash site. Night fell fast, wrapping the peaks in total darkness. In the command center, a single radar operator stared at the empty screen. The green trace of Raisi 1 had vanished hours ago, but he couldn't stop looking, hoping it might reappear. A miracle in the static. Raisi 1, this is Tehran Control. Do you read? He said again, voice trembling slightly. Only silence answered him. The officer removed his headset slowly and whispered, "Signal lost." No one spoke. Outside the window, lightning flickered over the city skyline. Distant, powerless, indifferent, somewhere far to the northwest. Deep within the fog-covered mountains, a faint glow of fire burned in the rain, the final resting place of the helicopter that had once carried the most powerful man in Iran. The radio that once crackled with life now lay shattered among the wreckage, its light dimming as the storm raged on, and with that last flicker, the valley fell silent forever. The night was long, cold, and merciless. Over the jagged mountains of northwestern Iran, rain poured endlessly, washing over the valleys that now held a secret too heavy for the earth itself. The storm still roared, flashes of lightning tearing through the black sky, revealing glimpses of rugged peaks and deep ravines. Somewhere within that darkness, the wreck of Raisi 1 lay buried, broken, burning faintly, unseen. At 11:15 p.m., search operations were in full swing. Convoys of military trucks struggled through flooded dirt roads, tires sinking into the mud. The rescue teams, hundreds of soldiers, firefighters, and Red Crescent workers, were soaked to the bone, their flashlights cutting weakly through the mist. Every man moved with silent urgency, aware of who they were searching for. "Keep communication open with Tehran Command," barked the field officer through his radio. "All teams check in every 10 minutes. We're looking for any sign, heat, metal, movement, anything." From the base camp below, drones equipped with infrared sensors buzzed through the rain. Their live feeds flickered on monitors inside a mobile command vehicle, where officers watched grainy black and white images of endless ridgelines and shadowy forests. But the storm was still too strong. Even technology had its limits tonight. One drone operator squinted at his screen. "There," he said, pointing to a faint glow near the edge of a ravine. The commander leaned closer. "Is that fire?" "Could be debris, sir," marked the coordinates. "Send Team Alpha." The order was relayed immediately. Soldiers in rain gear moved out, climbing steep slopes slick with mud. Their boots slipped on wet stone. Wind whipped against their helmets. The beam of a flashlight caught fragments of twisted metal, first small, then larger. The closer they got, the stronger the smell of fuel and smoke became. Then they saw it. Down in the ravine, half hidden by fog and trees, burned the remains of the helicopter. Flames hissed under the rain, sending smoke curling into the air. Pieces of the fuselage were scattered over the rocks like torn paper. The Iranian flag, still visible on the tail, was charred but recognizable. The lead rescuer spoke softly into his radio. "Command, we found it." A silence followed on the other end, the kind that only comes when bad news is fully understood. Then a faint voice replied, "Confirm visual." "Confirmed. No signs of life." The rain continued to fall as the rescuers descended carefully toward the wreckage. They moved through ash and debris, faces grim. One soldier knelt beside a piece of the cabin door, its edges blackened. Inside they found what was left of the official seal of the Iranian presidency, melted into the metal. They said nothing. No one could. As dawn began to break, the storm finally eased. The first light of morning touched the mountains, revealing everything that the night had hidden: the twisted steel, the broken seats, the faint trail of smoke rising into the gray sky. A medic placed a small Iranian flag over the wreck site. Another bowed his head and whispered a prayer. By 6:00 a.m., the message reached Tehran. Confirmed. The presidential helicopter has gone down. No survivors. The capital fell silent. Television anchors, trembling, read the official statement. Mosque loudspeakers echoed with verses of mourning. Flags across government buildings were lowered to half-mast. Traffic stopped. People stood in the streets, phones in hand, staring in disbelief at the headlines flashing across screens. President Ebrahim Raisi dead in helicopter crash. Inside homes, families wept. In mosques, men prayed. Even those who opposed him politically spoke of the tragedy. A nation's leader gone in the blink of an eye. At the crash site, investigators arrived within hours, stepping cautiously among the wreckage. Black boxes were recovered, charred but intact. Experts spoke quietly among themselves. Mechanical failure? Weather impact? One asked. Another shook his head. Or something else. By afternoon, rumors began to spread across Tehran, across social media, across the world. Some claimed the helicopter had been sabotaged. Others insisted it was the weather. A few whispered of deeper conspiracies, of enemies who had waited for the perfect storm. Foreign governments issued statements of condolence. News networks across Europe, America, and the Middle East broadcast live footage of the smoldering crash site. Analysts debated, diplomats speculated, and the truth, like the fog still hanging over the mountains, remained hidden. As the day wore on, the rescue workers gathered the remains of those on board and placed them gently in flag-draped caskets. The sound of a helicopter echoed overhead, this time carrying not passengers, but the memory of those who would never return. One officer stood at the edge of the ravine, watching as the morning sun finally broke through the clouds. The wreckage below glimmered faintly in the light, and for a brief moment everything was still. The storm had ended, but the silence it left behind was heavier than thunder. The officer murmured to himself, "The mountain keeps its secrets." Far away in Tehran, a black banner was hung across the presidential palace gates. Crowds lined the streets, candles flickering in their hands. Some prayed, others simply stood in silence, looking toward the gray horizon, toward the north, where their leader had vanished. By evening, as darkness fell again over the land, the wreckage still smoldered faintly in the mountains. The fog began to return, curling through the trees like memory. The soldiers packed their gear, leaving behind a simple metal sign on a rock near the site. In memory of the fallen, may they rest in peace. And as the last rescue helicopter lifted off, the valley returned to silence. The wind swept through the wreckage, carrying with it the echoes of rotors, the whispers of unanswered questions, and the weight of a mystery that would haunt generations. The morning fog rose once more, veiling the mountains in its eternal shroud, as if nature itself refused to reveal what had truly happened on that flight. And in that silence, beneath the endless sky, the story of a leader's final journey lived on, written not in words, but in the ashes and shadows of the mountains.